Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back, of course, to the Time Bomb channel. Thanks as always for your time and for your view. And I wanted to do a little bit of a face-off or a bezel-off today with two very well-known G-Shocks. I think most of my vids feature one watch at a time and never really a direct comparison. So I've done a couple, but not as many as I want to. It's a little bit of a change up. So the first that we have over here then is the very venerable G-Shock DW6900, and then one of its cousins, the GW6900. So just for simplicity, I'm going to refer to them as the DW or the GW. The DW here on the right is the more old school design, having been around since I think the mid-90s, and probably safe to say that one of those G-Shock models that started many of the G-Shock firsts, and I think also went quite a long way in developing their current huge fan base. They've been around for such a long time that there's heaps of colorways available, so it's very, very easy to fall down the G-Shock rabbit hole as of course of this watch, so you have been warned. I think it might also be one of the G-Shocks that rivals the humble F91 here for its appearance in the movies. I think that the F91 has probably had more cameos than the DW6900, but do feel free to correct me if that is incorrect. I refer to the GW6900 as perhaps maybe, I don't know, the cousin. It's like perhaps maybe one of the offsprings of the DW in that it carries many of the design cues, etc., but with a few key upgrades. So I'm just going to pause the camera, get a little bit closer to these so we can check them out. Okay, so just for simplicity's purposes then, I'll try to keep the DW on the right and the GW on the left. Now, I've picked these up on Amazon US, imported to the UK. The GW was sold as nearly new, as clearly it's been out of the box and there's a little bit of wear on the strap. Now, the key specs on them is that they both run about 53 mils across, 50 mils top to bottom, and then around 16, 17 mils deep. Now, one of the key differentiating factors I thought about these two was that the GW weighed more because of the advanced module and the solar panels, solar cells. And even on Amazon, they advertise it as weighing 112 grams, and this one only 62. In actual fact, this one weighs around 64 on my scales, and this one only 61. So I'm a bit confused as to what's going on here. So let's just focus more on the specific differences between the two. Now, to my eyes on the display, the GW digits are taller and clearer than they are on the DW here, and I actually prefer that. This one, probably because the screen is a little bit older, because obviously the watches themselves are older, just seems to be a fraction grey blue, whereas this one has that slightly yellowy tinge, and I think making it, again, as I say before, just a little bit clearer. These also then carry a nickname. They carry the nickname, as the video title suggests, of the three eyes. Obviously, then just in reference to the three circles at the top. The nickname of three eyes is not a new concept. All we need to do, I think, is to ask Shiva, or maybe one of his buddies, Blinky. And then there was a very popular three-eyed raven, been on the TVs recently. But anyway, the correct nomenclature for those three eyes at the top is actually the triple graph. And as you can see, they do feature quite heavily or quite dominantly on both of the two watches. But on the GW on the left, all three of those eyes actually have a function. On the left hand side, let me just bring it a bit closer. So on the left hand side then we have PS, which meaning power save, and then the high, which is referring to the battery charge. The second dial there we have then indicates the function, and then obviously on the right here we've got seconds counting away. It also gives us the indication that this one has received its multiband 6 time accuracy, whereas then on here they're slightly more eye candy in that you've got countdowns of the seconds on that first one on the left, and then when it's done one, it adds a little bit of slice of pie, it moves on into to the next one, and then when it's done all of that, it then logs it over here. I mean, so again, they're more for eye candy and for good looks than they are than they actually have a function. And that's one of the things that put me off these things in the first place, because I just thought, it's a little bit, it just seemed to me to be a little bit redundant. Anyway, the eyes as well, not only my perspective, but they seem to be many other people's main point of contention on the 6900 range in general, in that they take up quite a lot of real estate on the dials, and I think people dislike the fact that they didn't have a function, but then I think they also had League of fans who just like the fact that they look good. And so when they've moved into changes on these, they've clearly taken that on board and added those functions in on the GW here on the left. And as I say, I don't think they're really that much of a point of contention, because it hasn't stopped us watch nutters buying them, because these things still sell in droves. And also the way that they've added variety to the range in general, I think, most people seem to be able to get over that aspect. To me, it's also important to remember that the design brief of those triple graphs actually comes as a homage to motorcycle dials. So in my eyes, that gets an extra 2 points. You can also see how Casio have played with the triple graphs at the top on different designs. They've framed them differently, so these two here on the right have been sort of lumped together. Then this one is then separated, whereas over here they seem to be running they carry less that frame, but then they do sort of make the one on the right there just that slightly bit, and they do that on different models very differently. Again, I think it just sort of gives additional variety. The light buttons on both of them are very, very similar, housed with that little protection over the top there. Works really well, and just your thumb sits on there even when it's on wrist, absolutely perfect. In the dark, they look like this. I think pretty much there's not too much to separate the two of them. However, the GW on the left here does have that option to extend the light glow from 1 to 3 seconds, whereas you don't have that on the DW. I think the DW, though, as the originator, was one of the first G-Shocks, I think, to feature electroluminescence as opposed to an LED. And I'm not sure if they stole that or borrowed that concept from Timex, or whether it was the other way around. As I mentioned before, the dial aperture on these two is quite similar, not dissimilar in size. This one seems to be larger on the GW in real estate, but I think here there's a as I say, the digits are a little bit taller to me. You've got the multi-6 at the top here, so again you've got very different dial designs with the text around the edges here. The colors on the DW, then obviously there's more of them. You've got color on font, you've got more color on dial. But I mean, if you do think that there's that they're lacking in a splash of color, then the aftermarket options to you are almost limitless. You've got everything from jelly bezels through to full steel conversions, through to Wu-Tang style, or whatever takes your fancy. And I think there's quite a bit of interchangeability between parts. The buttons, let me just pop them onto the side here. The buttons are almost identical in size, shiny and held in by those button guards. The one thing I did notice on the DW is that let me just make sure that that's focused in the right place. The adjust button, excuse me, I've got it upside down. The adjust button is quite depressed in there. So again, it makes it a little bit difficult to press. Whereas in contrast on these ones here, you can see that they sit much more proudly outside of the bezel, the case body there, making them much easier to operate. So that's easier to operate on the GW than on the others. I mean, here they're fine. So again, now that one you see as well is depressed, isn't it? There, it's Slightly different on the DW, and again, I don't know if that's a design difference or it's the fact that this is nearly new from Amazon. Might have something to do with it. Another bit of feedback in general about the two is that people seem to dislike the straps, claiming they're a little bit stiff. I think that's simply down to the fact that they're new. They just take a little bit of wearing in. The DW on the right then obviously features that slightly cheaper, I think, plastic buckle, whereas over here we've got a little bit more of a recognizable stainless steel one. The finishing on both, I think, is absolutely spot on. You know, they're not shiny. I prefer this matte finishing. It's much smoother, and I think it looks better as well. Let me just pause there and throw them, pull the camera back so I can throw them on wrist. So this is the GW on wrist. My wrist is 7¼ So again, really do not be taken in at all by the overall size of the bezel, because the dial aperture itself is very manageable. I mean, I think, yeah, with the weight that these things are, I think on wrist, you know, that size disappears. It hugs the wrist really nicely. Very, as I say, between combination of light and good looks, I think, yeah, as I say, my wrist 7¼ but I think these will work on many wrist sizes. I think if you're considering which of one of these to buy, I think it's probably down to the functionality or the functions that each one's offer. As I say, this one being multi-band, being solar, and this one then perhaps having a more minimalistic function, it might tip you in one direction or the other. I think a lot of G-Shock diehard fans are probably going to struggle to ignore the iconic nature of the DW, being as it was one of those firsts, and they might be able to forgive it its more basic setup as a consequence. But remember that these are two stalwart beta watches that will withstand some hard love, and they come in at a very different price. My simple preference is the GW, and that's due to the fact that, you know, it's solar powered, it's got the multiband 6, and as you can see as well here, you got the option to put it in a 24-hour display, which is just the way I prefer my digital watches. And I also prefer the fact that the triple graph at the top then has a utility, but that's simply my preference and my requirements. All right. But anyway, as I say, what do you guys reckon? Which do you think offers the better wrist candy, and what's the reason for thinking that? Look forward to your comments down below. As always, appreciate your time and your view. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It'd be massively appreciated. We're growing quite quickly. And of course, until the next vid, this is the Bombardier signing off. Cheers, guys.